Hey guys, tonight we journey back to a time when beauty was both a battlefield and a spiritual dilemma. You're walking down a cold stone corridor of a medieval castle, the torchlight flickering across tapestries and cracked portraits. You hear the shuffle of silk slippers, the faint rustle of stiffened skirts, and the scent of something vaguely herbal. Maybe rosemary, or maybe just mould. A pale-faced noblewoman glides past you, her cheeks oddly red, her lips unnaturally blue, and her smile framed by teeth that look slightly green. You try not to stare, but it's hard, because in this world, everything you thought you knew about beauty is upside down. What's elegant now was weird back then, and what's gross now might have been irresistibly chic. And the truth? You probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes under their skincare regime. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is right now in your part of the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink slowly as your medieval tour begins in a lady's chamber. Stone walls lined with wooden chests, animal pelts, and a polished metal mirror, which, fun fact, distorts your face just slightly, so good luck with your contouring. She's dabbing her cheeks with a rosy powder made from crushed cochineal insects, red ochre, or wine sediment. It's not just makeup, it's survival, because having red cheeks and a milky white face tells everyone you're rich enough to stay inside, away from the peasant sun and the toil of manual labour. But that powdered face? It's caked with lead. Literal lead. The longer she wears it, the paler her skin, and the faster her body decays from within. It's a slow burn to organ failure, all for the look of porcelain perfection. Historians still argue whether this was sheer ignorance or willful glamour suicide. Your guide points out her teeth, and you instinctively recoil. Rotting, darkened teeth were often unavoidable. No toothpaste, no dental floss, and medieval mouthwash was sometimes just vinegar or ash. But oddly, the decay wasn't always frowned upon. If you had access to sugar, which most nobles did, rotting teeth meant you were wealthy enough to rot. Sweet, isn't it? Meanwhile, her eyes glint blue. Not because she's wearing contacts, but because she's just put a drop of belladonna, deadly nightshade, into each eye. It dilates the pupils, giving her a wide-eyed, dreamy stare. Also, mild hallucinations and a racing heart. Fashion is pain, right? As she powders, the door opens, and in walks another noblewoman with 2 maids in tow, one brushing her hair with horsehair combs, the other holding a tiny pot of crushed pearls. It's going on her décolletage. Shine equals allure. You learn that applying crushed gemstones, seashells, and ground alabaster was totally normal, especially before banquets or court visits. There's no less is more here, more is more, until your skin starts peeling. Then comes the scent, a thick perfume of ambergris and animal musk. You wrinkle your nose. It smells like sweet decay, maybe a hint of wet fur. Back then, though, it was the height of seduction. Why? Because bathing was rare, and masking your scent with something equally strong and expensive was a power move. As you drift through the room, you notice paintings on the walls. Women with impossibly pale skin, crimson lips, and golden hair that practically floats. Some of it's real, some is fantasy. Court painters exaggerated beauty to elevate social status. The more ethereal you looked in oil paint, the more divine your lineage seemed. No one wanted to be painted accurately. That was for peasants. One woman in a painting stares at you, her eyes oddly far apart, her chin narrow and pointed. It's not just bad art. That was actually a beauty ideal, the so-called heart-shaped face. Achieving it sometimes meant binding the cheeks or using subtle facial taping. Yes, really. There are even rumours of herbal plasters to reshape features over time, though whether they worked is, well, debated. The ladies gossip in hushed tones about someone in the next duchy who dyed her eyebrows black using soot and goose fat, only to accidentally singe half of them off during a candlelit dinner. You chuckle, then you realise you're next. Someone hands you a mirror. In it, your face looks rough, sun-touched, healthy, way too healthy. You'd be instantly pegged as a farmer or field worker, probably someone who smells of livestock. You'd never pass for nobility here. Not unless you caked on the lead paint, bleached your hair with lye, and got very, very good at pretending not to blink when your eyes are full of poison. The irony, of course, is that many women died young, riddled with lead poisoning, mercury rash, and chronic infections, all in pursuit of a fleeting illusion. The beauty was artificial, yes, but the danger was very real. Some modern historians suggest these rituals were a form of class-based self-destruction, a slow burn that preserved privilege while culling the competition. And still, they kept at it. Every morning, the same routine. Scrape, paint, pluck, dab, and scent. Because beauty wasn't optional. It was power. It was a marriage offer. It was survival in a court that judged your face before your soul. You exit the chamber, your head spinning slightly from the perfumes, and descend a winding staircase to the kitchens below. There a scullery maid giggles, her face streaked with flour, her hands calloused. She's beautiful, in an earthy, sun-warmed kind of way. Healthy cheeks, a solid frame, thick braids falling down her back. No paint, no lead, just real life. But in this world, she doesn't stand a chance. And that, dear listener, is where your journey into the strange backwards elegance of medieval beauty standards truly begins. You've seen the powder, smelled the musk, and peered into the warped mirror. But we're just scratching the surface. There's more to pluck, more to peel, more to smear, and so many rules left to break. You drift downward into the next level of this medieval maze, this time into the heart of alchemy and outrage. You're in a back room, cluttered with little glass vials, ceramic bowls, and pungent bundles of dried herbs hanging from the beams. There's a candle sputtering on the table, and beside it, a pot of something that looks like creamy mud and smells disturbingly like riverbank. You pick up the label, written in scratchy Latin. It reads, Sterco crocodili, crocodile dung. Yes, that is exactly what you think it is. Turns out medieval beauty routines sometimes crossed into the realm of what in the actual heck. Crocodile dung, when dried and mixed with vinegar, was thought to whiten the skin or clear blemishes. And that's just one recipe. You also had snail slime, bat blood, crushed beetles, and mixtures so acidic they could eat through wood. These weren't tucked away in dusty apothecaries either. Wealthy women had these concoctions prepared in their own homes. It was like a very cursed episode of a medieval beauty influencer's YouTube channel. You imagine a noblewoman applying her night routine. Step 1. Cleanse with stale wine. Step 2. Exfoliate with crushed walnut shells. Step 3. Smooth on a face mask of crocodile dung and rosewater. Step 4. Pray it doesn't give you a rash before tomorrow's banquet. Beauty hurts, but sometimes it itches too. Historians still argue whether these recipes came from actual medical beliefs or were more about symbolic purification. Some ingredients, like rose oil and vinegar, had real antimicrobial properties. Others, like lizard guts or frog bile, were more like ritualized weirdness passed off as science. The line between skincare and witchcraft got very blurry. And speaking of blurry lines, here come the monks. As you leave the beauty lab, you wander into a cloister garden. It's quiet except for the trickle of a fountain and the rustle of parchment. A friar scowls at you from under his hood, muttering something about vanity and the devil's mirror. He's referring, of course, to literal mirrors. At several points in the Middle Ages, religious authorities openly condemned their use, especially among women. A woman who looked too long into a mirror was said to be inviting pride, temptation, and even demonic possession. One particularly dramatic sermon warned that the mirror is a window through which the devil peers into the soul. And yes, priests really preach this stuff from pulpits, often while ignoring their own polished goblets and jewel-encrusted crucifixes. You peek into the monk's study. There's a manuscript open on the table, filled with commentary on female vanity. He's underlining a passage from a 13th century theologian who claimed that hair dye was a sinful mask and that painting one's face was to lie with your skin. Kind of poetic, really. But here's the wild thing. Some women fought back. Quietly, of course. You find a small psalter tucked into a nun's trunk, its margins scribbled with hidden recipes for rose balm and saffron blush. Turns out, the line between spiritual and sensual was not only blurry, it was often crossed with a wink and a secret stash of powder. It's around this time that you stumble into a bathhouse. Don't get too excited. It's not exactly spa day. The public bathhouses of medieval towns were grimy, steamy, and often scandalous. Picture dim stone rooms filled with half-dressed nobles and peasants alike, soaking in water laced with lavender, rosemary, and sometimes onion juice. Because why not? Baths weren't always about hygiene. They were also social hubs, places where gossip spread faster than soap, which by the way was made from animal fat and ashes. You eavesdrop on two women debating whether ground pearls or lemon juice makes a better hand scrub. You think you mishear, but no. One of them does mention using pigeon droppings for skin softening. The medieval version of a luxury peel. As the bathhouse steams up, you learn about one particularly controversial practice, the use of mercury-based creams. Supposedly, they lightened the skin and erased freckles, but they also burned, caused tremors, and slowly poisoned the user. You shiver. Not from the cold, but from the idea that beauty here means gambling with your life every morning. At the door, a healer sits with a mortar and pestle, grinding something that smells sharp and medicinal. She's mixing a complexion tonic with vinegar, mint, and crushed rose petals. It's one of the few things here that might actually help instead of harm. You watch her stir slowly, the scent gently cutting through the bathhouse stench. She looks up and whispers, "Vanity is a sin, child, but looking lovely? That's just survival." She winks. As you leave, passing a young man rubbing scented oils into his hair, you start to notice something else. The contradiction of it all. On one hand, beauty is condemned, tied to temptation, pride, and feminine weakness. On the other hand, it's demanded. Wives must be attractive, court ladies must compete, and even nuns are sometimes judged by their spiritual radiance, which, oddly enough, always seems to include clear skin and a symmetrical face. You're not imagining it. Beauty here is a tightrope walk. Tip too far one way, and you're a vain harlot. Too far the other, and you're an unloved spinster. The rules are whispered, inconsistent, and almost always unfair. Still, people tried. Every day. Mixing, mashing, praying and applying. The desire to feel lovely, to look admired, to be chosen. It's timeless. Even when it smells like crocodile dung. You step out into the cool night air, your nose still tingling with onion steam and rose oil. A bell chimes from the chapel nearby. It's midnight, and the moon glints off the still simmering pots inside the apothecary. And tomorrow, the routine starts again. You wake up, or maybe you never really slept, in a sun-drenched manor garden. Everything's drenched in golden morning light, but the moment you lift your face to feel its warmth, a noblewoman nearby gasps in horror. She clutches her parasol, as though you've committed some sort of crime. And in this world, you have. You've tanned. Here in medieval Europe, being tan means one thing. You work, you labour, you're outdoors. In other words, you're poor. and that's not just unfortunate, it's unfashionable. You watch as two women in impossibly heavy gowns glide across the gravel path under lace-trimmed veils and straw hats the size of cartwheels. Their skin is ghostly pale, almost translucent. One of them actually has visible blue veins painted onto her chest with a fine brush. It looks a bit like a Renaissance treasure map, but this was considered peak elegance. The more your skin looked like polished marble, the more elite you seemed. You reach up and brush your own cheek. Still warm, still flushed, way too alive looking. You'll need to fix that. Back in a lady's dressing room, you sit still while a servant dabs a white paste onto your face. It's made from vinegar, egg whites and, surprise, more lead. If you're lucky, it'll stay on through dinner. If you're not, it'll flake into your soup. Historians still debate how much medieval women truly understood about the dangers of these substances. Some say they were oblivious, assuming more makeup meant better skin. Others argue they knew exactly what they were doing, but kept up the routines because the pressure to appear pale was stronger than the threat of illness, like choosing reputation over respiration. But why pale, though? Where did this obsession come from? Some say it goes back to classical ideals, ancient Greek statues with smooth white marble skin. Others link it to Christian iconography. You glance at a stained glass Madonna in the chapel. Her skin is pearl white. Her robes are gold-threaded. Even divinity, it seems, must avoid the sun. Pale skin also implied that you didn't have to walk anywhere. If your feet never touched muddy roads, if you were carried on a litter and lounged by indoor fires, your skin would show it. You weren't just clean, you were above dirt. Even your hands had to look the part. A noble woman's fingers were supposed to be long, white and soft. You see a servant buffing a lady's knuckles with crushed almonds and rosewater. And to keep their hands uncalloused, some wore silk gloves to bed. Not sexy gloves, more like medieval oven mitts filled with lotion. No one's writing romance ballads about that part. Meanwhile, you catch sight of a peasant girl outside the manor gates, balancing a basket on her hip. Her skin glows with health and sunlight. Her arms are strong. Her cheeks are flushed with actual circulation, not beetroot paste. She's stunning, but no one here would say so. There's something painful about that. A beauty standard built not around wellness but around its opposite. The goal wasn't to look vibrant, it was to look untouched, almost sickly, like a statue or a ghost. And here's where it gets weirder. To enhance the illusion of delicate paleness, some women would literally bleed themselves. Not dramatically, just a little leech here, a small cut there. Just enough to lose that inconvenient hint of ruddy colour. It was like medieval contouring, except it required gauze and a very high tolerance for fainting. You wander into a side chamber and find an open notebook. It's written by a court physician. Inside, charts tracking skin tones, vein visibility, and face symmetry. He's not writing love poetry, he's writing metrics, because beauty wasn't just admired, it was calculated. That brings you to the milk skin obsession. Recipes abound, goat milk baths, sour cream masks, even milk mixed with crushed lavender and honey. Cleopatra may get all the credit now, but medieval European ladies were soaking themselves long before anyone bottled it. If it turned your skin pale and smooth, it was worth the curdled smell. One noble woman boasts that she drinks nothing but almond milk and cucumber water to cool her complexion. You nod politely, trying not to laugh, because her breath smells like pickled fish and honey. Glamorous. But the irony is, for all this effort, aging still won. Quickly. By 30, many women's skin was patchy from years of paint, powder and sun avoidance. Their hair thinned from caustic dyes, their teeth blackened, and when their beauty faded, so did their value in court. A harsh truth whispered behind fans. So what happened to those women? You find one in the garden sitting quietly. Her face no longer powdered. Her hair, streaked with silver, is braided simply. She smiles as you pass, then looks away. Not with shame, but relief. Maybe she's finally free from the mirror's tyranny, or maybe she's just run out of beetroot. Historians still argue whether beauty standards changed after the Black Death, when so many young, pretty nobles died so fast that society rethought its ideals. Some believe it ushered in a wave of more earthy aesthetics. Others think the obsession simply moved onto portraits, tomb sculptures, and remembered perfection. And you head back inside, past a girl layering on her 8th coat of pale paste, and wonder how many of these beauty rules still echo in today's creams, filters, and trending TikToks. Are we any freer now, or just playing with cleaner ingredients? One last glance in the mirror. You're a little pale, a little powdery, a little poisoned, just enough to fit in. You're seated now on a wooden stool in front of a noblewoman's dressing table, and someone is leaning in with tweezers made from polished bone. They don't ask permission, they just start plucking. 1, 2, 3 hairs yanked from your brow, and already your eyes are watering. You instinctively flinch and the hand holding your chin tightens. Hold still, the attendant mutters. A smooth forehead is the height of refinement. You thought they'd be shaping your brows into some elegant arch, number. They're removing them entirely. In the medieval world, the perfect woman has a bare, serene upper face. No brow, no edge, no expression. The look is clean, distant, angelic. It's as if her thoughts were erased along with her eyebrows. Expressionless becomes elegant. You glance into the mirror. You're halfway to alien chic. This is no one-off trend. Eyebrow removal was so popular that entire manuals described how to do it. Apply walnut oil to weaken the roots. Use hot cloths to loosen the skin. Then pull gently. Emphasis on gently, though that's easy for the manual to say. You try not to scream. And it wasn't just eyebrows. The real prize. An enormous, gleaming forehead. It had to be as high and wide as possible. Think billboard space. The larger your forehead, the more pure and intelligent you appeared. The logic? A big forehead gave you a look of divine wisdom. Or maybe it just left more room for dramatic sighing. Historians still debate whether this came from classical ideals or Christian mysticism. Some say it was meant to mimic the serene faces of saints in illuminated manuscripts. Others think it evolved from aristocratic portraiture, where foreheads were exaggerated to emphasize status. Whatever the origin, the result was the same. Women plucked hairlines upward until their scalps hurt. You sit very still while a servant runs a dull knife over your upper forehead, scraping away the tiniest baby hairs. She follows with a cloth soaked in vinegar and sage, meant to stunt regrowth. It smells like salad and regret. A noblewoman in the corner explains that the look is called the front, and ladies spend hours perfecting it. She proudly tells you her hairline is an inch higher this year. You try not to stare. She looks permanently surprised. What's ironic is that while everyone's chasing the high forehead dream, they're also hiding the rest of their hair. Head coverings were mandatory in most settings. Married women especially were expected to keep their hair covered as a sign of modesty. That's not to say they didn't take pride in it. Under the veils, you'd find hair treated with eggs, ash or barley water for shine and thickness. Just in case someone accidentally caught a glimpse, there's a story you hear whispered between two chambermaids about a duchess who was shamed because her forehead was found too low for court. They say she locked herself away for months and returned with a new veil, new brows, and a slightly different face. Whether that's true or just a well-circulated cautionary tale, no one really knows. But in this world, appearance isn't just personal, it's political. Some noble women even enhanced the smoothness of their foreheads with a thin layer of egg white, painted on and dried like a skin-type mask. It pulled everything upward, erased lines and left a shiny finish. You try it, you blink. Your skin crinkles like parchment. Outside, you watch girls walking to chapel with their hairlines practically touching the tops of their skulls. It's mesmerizing and slightly terrifying. The shape makes them all look like marble statues or living icons, soft, holy, untouchable. It's no wonder men were told to avert their eyes. Looking at a woman too long might invite lust, or worse, challenge the church's monopoly on sacred beauty. Back inside, you hear a knight jesting with a courtier about how he can always spot a noblewoman from her mile of forehead. The courtier laughs, then adds, "That's where they keep their secrets." You're not sure if he's mocking the trend or just afraid of women with too much skull space. Historians still debate how widespread these trends truly were. Were they limited to court life? Or did they trickle down to the merchant classes, the wives of guild masters, the daughters of wealthy farmers? Some evidence suggests lower classes mimicked elite fashion in quieter ways, plucking fewer hairs, using diluted lemon juice instead of vinegar, shaping brows into thinner lines rather than removing them entirely. You can't help but admire the sheer effort. There were no razors, no spa tools, no fancy serums, just cloth, oil, and an unreasonable level of dedication. These weren't lazy fads. They were daily rituals, fueled by pain tolerance and peer pressure. And yet, there's a strange stillness to it all. When the room is quiet and the plucking's done, you look around at the women, bare foreheads gleaming, brows vanished, faces soft and blank. It's like being in a room full of portraits waiting to be painted. Nobody moves, nobody speaks. They just sit, poised, elegant, expressionless. You wonder what thoughts lie behind those smooth foreheads. Hopes, regrets, maybe the secret knowledge that all of this is temporary, that hair grows back, fashions change, and a high forehead can't save you from a broken heart or a bad marriage contract. Still, for now, it's the standard. You've been waxed, plucked, polished and peeled. You look in the mirror, and you are, by their rules, beautiful. You blink slowly in the hazy candlelight of yet another chamber. This one smells of lavender, melted wax, and the distinct tang of singed hair. You're seated on a cushioned stool once again, and someone is holding your bangs between their fingers, about to shave them off. You ask hesitantly if this is strictly necessary. The maid doesn't answer. She simply hums a soft hymn and draws the razor across your scalp, lifting the hairline even higher. You thought your eyebrows were the end of it. Oh no. Tonight, you learn the sacred art of the medieval forehead extension program, version 2. The hairline shave. It's not subtle. Women in court didn't want a little extra space. They wanted to look like their thoughts began halfway up their skull. And to achieve that, they removed not just brows, but everything above them. The most fashionable women could boast a 5 head that would make a modern runway model flinch. The logic? If a wide, bare forehead is intellectual, then an even wider one must be practically divine. You peer into a bronze mirror as another inch of hair disappears. The top of your head now resembles a canvas, blank, glowing, breezy. To make the effect even more dramatic, women would sometimes starch and iron their veils so that they jutted out stiffly from behind the hairline, creating a kind of floating halo. It was less about being seen and more about being witnessed, as if your forehead wasn't part of your body anymore. It was a moral statement. You shuffle past a group of ladies comparing their foreheads over wine. One of them swears her sister uses boiled fig water to soften the scalp before shaving. Another boasts that her maid uses an imported Turkish razor for the cleanest cut. You smile politely, though inwardly you're just hoping yours doesn't bleed again. Historians still argue whether these hairline trends were enforced or merely encouraged through peer pressure. Some suggest there was a degree of self-policing among noblewomen. If one arrived to court with a suspiciously low hairline, she might be gently excluded from the conversation, or worse, mistaken for a merchant's daughter. Not that there's anything wrong with that. You just wouldn't want to be accused of working for a living. While the upper classes were shaving and starching, the lower classes had their own ways of signalling modest beauty. A peasant bride might braid her hair into two thick ropes, woven with bits of ribbon or wildflowers. Her hair was her pride, her crown, quite literally. And unlike noblewomen, she didn't have to hide it behind veils, but she also wouldn't be shaving her scalp anytime soon. You reach up and feel your own freshly plucked and trimmed scalp. It's smoother than it should be, cooler than it was this morning. You're half numb, half delirious. And then the wigs come out. Yes, wigs. Contrary to what you might expect, medieval Europe wasn't completely foreign to false hair. While full, wigs weren't as common as in later centuries. Hairpieces were very much a thing, particularly if you'd overshaved, singed, or dyed your hair into submission. One lady shows you her frontlet, a type of false fringe sewn onto a linen cap. It matches her own golden locks perfectly. You reach out to touch it, and she swats your hand away. It's real silk, she hisses, as if you just tried to pet a sacred relic. Others use wigs more subtly, weaving strands into their braids, or hiding thin patches with carefully curled tufts. Some dye the fake hair with saffron for a golden hue, or rub it with chalk for that snowy blonde finish. You're tempted to ask if the whole court is one stiff breeze away from a collective hair malfunction. The irony? Under all the elaborate shaving, starching and silk veiling, the natural hairline becomes irrelevant. It's not about what you are born with, it's what you can craft. And in that way, beauty becomes less about nature and more about illusion. A travelling bard tells you a story about a noblewoman who arrived at court after a long sea voyage. Her veil had slipped slightly, revealing a hairline that, gasp, was an inch too low. The scandal was swift. She was nicknamed Lady Hedge because her hair grew like wild shrubbery. She reportedly fled the court within days. Whether that's true or just a cruel legend passed around court circles, no one really knows, but it sticks with you. You think about how fragile these ideals are, how easily beauty turns into punishment. Meanwhile, a young nobleman stands in front of a mirror, brushing his own hair back. He's using a paste of rosemary and honey, trying to encourage a shinier finish. His goal? A perfect widow's peak and neatly curled ends, structured, but not too pretty. Even men had to conform, though the expectations were more about dignity than divine grace. You catch a glimpse of yourself in the mirror again. No brows, elevated hairline, glimmering pale skin, and you start to see it. Not beauty, necessarily, but stultus. You look like someone who doesn't dig ditches, someone who reads Latin, someone who might, if you keep your back straight and your head held high, marry well. And maybe that's all it ever really was. Not about looking good, but about looking correct. As you drift out of the chamber and into the long, silent corridor, you notice how the torchlight flickers against the foreheads of passing women. The shine is real. The style is ridiculous. And yet somehow it works. There's something eerie and regal about all of it. You reach up and touch your forehead once more. It tingles slightly from the plucking and the oil. It feels like new skin. Blank skin. And as you step into the next part of this strange journey, you wonder just how many more layers they're going to strip away. You're drifting now into a smaller, quieter part of the manor, a storage room turned dressing chamber, filled with trunks, hat boxes, and shelves stacked high with fabrics that shimmer in the flickering candlelight. You reach out, running your hand along the velvets and brocades, the silks and stiffened linen. The textures are lush, but the smell is complicated. A mix of rose oil, damp wool, and maybe a hint of mouse. Charming. In the corner, a young attendant is carefully unwrapping something from a velvet pouch. It glints in the candlelight. Not jewels, hair, coils of fine golden hair stitched into netting. You lean closer. It's a wig, or more accurately, a hairpiece called a caul, designed to be pinned under a decorative veil. It's not hers, it's not even from someone alive necessarily. You try not to ask. Yes, medieval Europe was fond of false hair, and no, they weren't squeamish about where it came from. Hair was traded, bought, gifted, and sometimes cut from the dead. The goal was to enhance what you had, or pretend you had something entirely different. A bald spot, covered, limp texture, augmented, wrong colour, dyed or powdered until satisfactory. The medieval motto was clear: fake it with flair, but keep the illusion seamless. Over by the fire, two ladies are arguing about their hennins, the tall, pointy cone hats often associated with fairy tale princesses, except these things are real, and they're massive. One of them is at least 3 feet tall, draped with fine gauze veils. It bobs slightly as the wearer speaks, like a very elegant antenna searching for satellite signal. The hennin wasn't just about height, it was about structure. It transformed the head, extended the silhouette, and drew the eye upward. Everything about it screamed nobility, and better still, it conveniently hid bald patches from all that enthusiastic forehead shaving. Clever. You try one on. It's heavier than expected, slightly itchy, and makes doorways your mortal enemy. But oh, the drama. Veils, of course, were everywhere. They weren't just modesty tools, they were mood lighting for your face. A soft veil could blur features, smooth skin tones, and catch the candlelight, just enough to suggest mystery. Some were so sheer they were practically invisible, while others were stiffened with starch until they jutted out like sails. You brush past a wall-mounted mirror, polished metal, and glimpse your own reflection. With the hennin, the veil, and the newly shaved forehead, you look like you've wandered out of a painting. There's an otherworldliness to it, like beauty has been surgically removed from reality and reassembled in silk and starch. And then someone points out a wart. You pause. The lady who noticed it clucks sympathetically and offers a jar of paste made from goose fat, fig extract, and a touch of mercury. That should draw it out, she says with confidence. But warts, moles, scars, these were not just skin flaws. In the medieval imagination, they could carry meaning, sometimes superstitious, sometimes moralistic, sometimes, honestly, a little ridiculous. Historians still argue whether blemishes were always frowned upon, or if they could, under certain lighting and social circumstances, be considered exotic. One 14th century poem describes a lady's mole as a dark star beneath her eye, marking her destiny. Another describes a man rejecting his betrothed because her cheek had a shadow like a bruised apple. Harsh. In some cases, noblewomen would attempt to rearrange their skin, literally, using tapes, herbal plasters, or hot poultices to migrate moles or reduce lumps. One recipe you find in a handwritten booklet includes dried frog skin and powdered pearl, because why stop at absurd when you can add a sprinkle of luxury? You examine your reflection again and notice a small scar above your eyebrow. A courtier walking by gives you a subtle glance, then asks if it was from a fall or a duel. You mumble something vague. He nods, intrigued. You realise in that moment that scars on women were unattractive, but on men, charming, battle-tested, a sign of strength. Add that to the list of medieval double standards. Still, not all facial flaws were unwelcome. A single small mole on the cheek, if well placed, might be called a beauty mark, especially if it didn't resemble anything fungal, and some noble women even painted them on, just like in later centuries. Tiny dots of coal or berry stain, strategically placed, a mole near the mouth, sultry, near the eye, mysterious, on the forehead, a little too on the nose in this era. You overhear another maid talking about how her lady uses leeches to balance her humours. Bloodletting again. For beauty, not health. She thinks too much heat in the body has caused red blotches on her neck. The solution? Apply 2 small leeches, wait 10 minutes, then rinse with lavender water. You stare at the fireplace and wonder if maybe just a scarf would have worked. Then come the skin-toning masks. You watch a woman smear a thick paste of clay, rose oil, and crushed snail shells across her face and neck. She leaves it to dry until it cracks like desert earth. When it flakes off, her skin is, admittedly, smoother, but also slightly pink from whatever mystery acid was in that mix. You lean over to sniff it. It smells like garden mulch and regret. One girl tries to convince her friend to use boiled cow bile as an overnight mask. You slowly back out of the conversation. And finally, someone passes you a comb made of ivory. It's for stimulating the scalp, they say. More like scratching it raw, but it's what's expected. You sit, you scrape, you endure. Because even under veils and hennins, beauty matters. The illusion must hold. As you make your way back toward the central corridor, you catch glimpses of beauty being assembled like armour. False hair pinned into place. A blemish carefully painted over with powdered bone. A veil adjusted to catch the light just right. It's all a performance. A slow, careful, endlessly uncomfortable performance. And yet, for a moment, just one, you catch a woman removing her hennin, peeling back her veil and exhaling like someone who's held her breath all day. Her hair's a little greasy. Her brow is stubbly. Her skin flushed and real. You smile, she smiles back, then rewraps her hair and disappears into the illusion once more. You don't remember when exactly you entered the apothecary's workshop, but now you're here, surrounded by wooden shelves, buckling under the weight of little glass vials, wax-sealed jars, and tiny hand-labelled pots. The air smells like someone crushed a flower shop into a chemistry lab. At least 3 things in the room are bubbling ominously. A woman stands over a mortar, grinding something that looks innocent enough. Chalky white powder and dried flowers. You lean in. Face powder, she says with a smile. Lead and iris root keeps you luminous. You stare. Lead again. Welcome to the medieval beauty industry, where the glow comes at a cost and the ingredients list could double as a murder confession. This section of your journey is all about the risks, the dangerous beauty hacks of the time. You thought the crocodile dung and snail slime were bold? Just wait until the mercury comes out. She hands you a tiny glass bottle of eye brightener. It's mercury-based. Just 1 drop in each eye, she says, makes them glisten like morning dew, which sounds lovely, until she casually adds that it may also cause tremors, blurred vision, or hallucinations. Your pupils widen, probably just from fear. Historians still argue whether medieval people understood the long-term damage of these beauty treatments. Some evidence suggests they noticed the effects: hair loss, tremors, mouth sores, but chalked it up to bad humours or weak constitutions. Others claim women, and some men, knew exactly what they were doing, but the pressure to stay beautiful in court outweighed the risk. You dab a little powder onto your wrist and it immediately tingles. The woman smiles, pleased. Means it's working. You quickly wipe it off with a piece of linen and pretend you're fine. Elsewhere in the room, a teenage girl is applying ceruse, a thick white lead paint mixed with vinegar. It goes on like clay and gives her skin the illusion of marble. She's 14. She already has faint scarring on her jawline, but she looks pleased with the result, and honestly, in this light, she could pass for royalty. A small price to pay, for now. Another woman nearby is making her own lip stain. She mixes cochineal beetles, crushed with vinegar, and a touch of alum to make the colour pop. It's brilliant, a little too brilliant. She pats it on her lips and immediately sneezes. Turns out the beetles were slightly mouldy, classic rookie mistake. You pass a table filled with bottles labelled Aqua Tofana and Blanc de Saturn. Some of these sound more like poisons, and in some cases they were. Aqua Tofana was used later in history as an actual slow-acting poison disguised as a cosmetic. There's debate over whether something similar existed in earlier recipes, but the fact remains, applying makeup could slowly and quietly kill you. Even hair dye wasn't safe. Medieval blondes, for instance, used a paste of lye and alum to bleach their locks in the sun. It worked, sort of. It also burned. You peek out the window and see 2 women lying on boards in the courtyard, their hair slathered in yellow goo and stretched across curved wooden pillows to catch the sunlight. They've got wide-brimmed hats shading their faces and long cloths wrapped around their necks to prevent accidental tanning. They look like sun-drenched scarecrows in couture. You wander over to the table marked Tooth Care. This should be interesting. There's a pot of charcoal and mint. Promising. Then a smaller bowl labelled Mouse Brain Paste. You blink. The woman overseeing the station shrugs. For toothaches, she offers, and sometimes breath. Hard pass. You also learn that some ladies would rub their gums with honey and salt, hoping to prevent decay. Others used sage or parsley, which at least smells better. But overall there was no toothpaste, no floss, and definitely no dental consensus. Rotten teeth were normal, even fashionable, as you learned earlier. So tooth beauty hacks were more about not dying of infection than smiling with sparkle. Then comes the fragrance table. A man spritzes you with a perfume made of rosewater, cloves, and musk. Not synthetic musk, mind you. This is real musk, extracted from the gland of a deer or similar creature. He proudly tells you it's top quality. You nod politely, trying not to breathe through your nose. Scent in this era wasn't about smelling nice in the modern way. It was about masking, camouflaging, competing with the scent of sweat, sewage, and livestock. Perfume was survival. The richer the scent, the cleaner you were perceived to be, even if the opposite was true. One particularly daring woman rubs her neck with a paste made from civet, a secretion from a wild cat, thinking it smells exotic. To your modern nose, it smells like someone spilled soup on a fur coat, but everyone around her seems impressed. Another trend you come across? Freckle removal. Freckles were often seen as blemishes, especially on noble women. Recipes to erase them included vinegar, powdered alum, sulphur, and even ground bones. One particularly cursed recipe involves green vitriol iron sulfate, which could cause skin peeling if left on too long. And yet they persisted, dabbing carefully under their eyes, trading one imperfection for another. You pass a woman rubbing a garlic and honey mixture into her elbows. She explains it helps soften the skin and sweeten the joints. You just nod. Everyone here has their thing. And yet, you can't help noticing how calm they are. No one flinches when they apply lead to their cheeks. No one hesitates before inhaling powdered root or licking a spoon of vinegar-thickened dye. There's a quiet courage to it, a resignation, maybe even pride. After all, danger was woven into beauty like thread into fabric. You didn't just look lovely, you suffered for it. The better you looked, the more obvious your pain, and that pain, it was part of the charm. You sit for a moment, breathing in the strange, heady mix of herbs, smoke, and musk. A bottle of rose-scented camphor water sits beside you. You dab a bit on your temple. It cools your skin instantly. No poison, no sting. Just something nice. You smile, briefly. And then you hear someone sharpening a knife. Time for eyebrow maintenance again. You've wandered far from the powdered halls and perfumed chambers now. The road under your feet turns from polished stone to packed earth. The air smells different here. Wood smoke, fresh cut hay, a hint of manure, and something sweet like baked apples. Welcome to the village, where beauty means something entirely different. No mercury, no powdered pearls, and, blessedly, no crocodile dung. You sit on a sun-warmed bench outside a thatched cottage. A young woman with a wide smile and muscular forearms is pounding laundry against a stone slab. Her sleeves are rolled up, her cheeks are flushed, her hair is tied back in a simple braid. She looks healthy, and in medieval court circles, that would have been a problem. In noble society, beauty was all about signalling your distance from labour. Pale skin, slim limbs, delicate posture, proof that you never touched soil or carried anything heavier than a fruit knife. But down here, in the world of peasants, beauty meant the opposite. It was about strength, fertility, and resilience. The ability to milk a goat, birth 6 children, and still bake bread without breaking a sweat. Gorgeous. You watch a group of girls washing in the stream, scrubbing their arms with handfuls of mint and rough sand. No saffron masks, no egg white tighteners, just herbs and abrasion. And yet their skin glows, no lead required. One of the girls smiles at you and offers you a lump of homemade soap. It's made from ash and tallow. Smells like campfire and cooked meat. You take it and pretend to be honoured. A boy runs past laughing, his feet muddy to the knees. His older sister scolds him and rinses his hands in a bucket of chamomile water. Not because it's fragrant, but because chamomile helps prevent rashes. Here, everything beautiful has a use. Historians still debate how much crossover existed between noble and peasant beauty ideals. Some argue that peasants quietly admired noble fashion, mimicking veils or hair braiding with local materials. Others believe the divide was firm. Nobles painted their faces white, while peasants just got on with life. You can't help noticing that many of the village women wear flowers in their hair. Wild daisies, poppies, or woven bits of yarrow. It's not for show. It's habit, tradition, maybe even superstition. Certain flowers ward off spirits. Others invite fertility. Either way, it's natural beauty, literal beauty from nature. Back up at court, a sunburn is a sign of disgrace. Here, it's a medal. A golden stripe across the nose, or the deep brown tint of someone who's been outside all day. That means you're hardworking, capable, alive. You don't cover it, you wear it. You walk with one of the girls to her home, and she invites you to share a warm drink. Apple cider steeped with rosemary. She shows you her beauty box, which turns out to be a wooden bowl of healing salves, dried lavender, crushed sage, and a single shard of polished glass used as a mirror. There's no artifice, just care. Then she points proudly to her arms. Strong like my mother's, she says. Her tone is soft, but there's pride in it. The beauty here is generational, inherited, but not sculpted. You get what you get, and you make it work. There's freedom in that, but not total freedom. As she braids her hair tightly to keep it neat, she sighs and confesses that the local priest warned her about vanity last Sunday. Too much attention to appearance, even down here, still drew criticism. We're not meant to want it, she mutters, but we still do. That sounds familiar. You spend the evening watching the rhythms of village life. A mother brushing her daughter's hair with a carved comb, murmuring an old folk song. A girl chewing parsley for fresh breath before seeing a boy who lives 2 cottages down. An older woman dabbing vinegar on her joints and her temples, hoping it soothes both pain and wrinkles. There's laughter too. One young woman jokes that her freckles make her look like a spotted cow. Her friend responds, "Cows are sacred. You're halfway to holiness." Everyone laughs, and no one suggests covering them up. And yet, beauty still matters here. There are still weddings to arrange, glances to earn, babies to dream of. It's just different. Not performative, not poisonous, real. You climb a low hill and look back at the manor in the distance. A faint glow of torchlight flickers from its windows. Somewhere inside, women are scraping and painting, measuring their foreheads and dabbing scented paste under their armpits. Meanwhile, here in the quiet dusk, a girl is braiding her sister's hair by moonlight. 2 worlds, 1 word, beauty, but such different meanings. You lie back in the grass and stare at the sky. No hennin, no veil, just stars. You feel the earth beneath your hands, solid and warm. You feel your skin, still a little tinged with whatever soap that was. You feel Kiai clean, not polished, not perfect, just clean. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. You're back in the chapel now. It's early morning, the light slanting through stained glass windows in long beams of colour, dappling the floor in ruby, emerald and soft blue. The incense has already been lit, its sweet, smoky tendrils curling upward around worn stone columns and into the rafters. You hear soft chanting from somewhere beyond the altar, a humming rhythm that seems to wrap around your chest and tighten slightly. You're not here for prayer. You're here to learn how beauty, yes, even beauty, was tied to morality. Because in medieval Europe, beauty wasn't just admired, it was judged, measured, moralized, aesthetic and virtue, tangled like laces on a corset. You settle into a pew as a monk begins his sermon. It's not about salvation, it's about appearance. He speaks of the Virgin Mary's purity, her radiant face, her serene expression, her smooth, flawless skin. He says, beauty like hers is a reflection of the divine, but only if it's untainted by vanity. You sit straighter, sensing the tension building. Beauty is holy, but also dangerous. The monk's voice rises. He warns the women in the audience not to spend too long at their mirrors. A painted face is a mask for the devil, he intones. He recounts a tale of a lady who died suddenly in her chambers, her face still powdered, her soul called to judgment before she could wipe it clean. Everyone shudders. One lady subtly pats at her cheek with a lace kerchief. You glance over and see a faint smudge of rouge. Historians still argue whether sermons like these were taken seriously or quietly ignored. Many women, after all, still painted, plucked and powdered despite weekly warnings. Some scholars think the lectures were more about control than belief, another way to tether women's autonomy to religion. Others think fear of sin truly did shape beauty behaviour, at least publicly. You walk to the side of the chapel and examine an illuminated manuscript. A saint gazes heavenward, a perfect oval face beneath a golden halo. Her skin is flawless, her expression blank. Her hands folded in prayer, and not a hint of eyebrows. Even saints, it seems, followed fashion. But for ordinary women, beauty had to walk a tightrope. Look too plain, and you were unfeminine. Look too adorned, and you were a temptress. The goal? To appear naturally beautiful, without seeming to try. You couldn't win, but you had to play. One nun tells you quietly that even within convents, beauty didn't disappear. It just changed. Sisters whispered compliments about one another's clear skin or angelic features. It was subtle, but still present. She laughs a little and admits that her sister once sneaked in a pot of homemade rose balm and shared it with half the dormitory. You hear about a bishop who issued a decree forbidding the use of hair dye, another who demanded all veils cover the entire hairline to avoid tempting glances, and one priest who declared that freckles were marks of sin unless they were faint enough to be poetic. Even male beauty wasn't exempt. Cleanliness and grooming were seen as signs of spiritual discipline. A monk with neat fingernails and a freshly scrubbed tonsure was considered more devout than one who looked earthy. Looking holy became part of being holy, and yet contradictions abound. Church officials often blessed oils and balms for healing, which were also used to soften skin and scent the body. Saintly relics were often encased in jewel-encrusted vessels, glorified in gold, while sermons condemned women for wearing earrings. The hypocrisy glows as brightly as the altar candles. You wander into a side chapel and find a small fresco depicting the allegory of Vanitas. A woman stares into a mirror, her hair tumbling down like silk. Behind her, Death leans in with a skeletal hand, ready to tap her on the shoulder. The message is clear. Vanity invites death, and beauty fades, fast. Still you notice the woman in the fresco is perfectly painted. Her cheekbones are divine. In another corner, you overhear two women whispering about a local girl who wore blue eyeliner to mass. She says it's from lapis stone, one giggles. She says Mary would approve. You can't tell if they're mocking her or low-key planning to ask where she got it. This was the dance of medieval beauty and morality. Women were told not to try, but they still had to succeed. One noble woman tells you, in a hushed voice, that she fasts not for holiness, but to keep her figure modest and pious. Another says she prays daily for clear skin. It's easier to be kind, she confesses, when your cheeks aren't blotchy. You nod. It makes a strange kind of sense. You sit outside the chapel, on a stone bench, and notice a statue of Mary, gazing downward, with a face like porcelain. Sculptors didn't dare carve wrinkles. Saints didn't age. There's an eternal youth built into holiness, as though God's love comes with a built-in beauty filter. Even illness could be seen through a spiritual lens. A woman with a pale, delicate face might be praised for her angelic suffering. One with a crooked nose or scarred cheek might be rumoured to have fallen from grace, sometimes literally. You remember the peasant girl from the village, laughing with freckles across her face. Up here, she might be called blemished. Down there, she was radiant. Just goes to show, the judgment comes not from skin, but from society. You rise, the bells tolling noon, and walk down the aisle past worshippers with tightly veiled hair and glistening cheek oil. You wonder how many of them feel holy, or if they're just trying to look like they do. And as you push open the heavy chapel doors, light pouring in like a benediction, you realise something strange. You do feel lighter, not because your skin is flawless, but because for a moment you remembered that beauty, true beauty, isn't about rules. It's about being seen, even by yourself. You're in a castle courtyard now, mid-morning, surrounded by clanking armour and the thick leathery scent of saddle oil and old sweat. For a moment, it seems like you've wandered into a military parade. But then, you notice something curious. A knight is sitting on a bench, holding a small polished mirror, in one gauntleted hand and in the other, a tiny pair of tweezers. He's plucking stray beard hairs from beneath his chin, grumbling softly about symmetry. Another man, shirtless, despite the chill, is oiling his biceps with a fragrant mixture of rosemary and goose fat. You're not in a war camp, you're in a medieval man spa. Because beauty wasn't just for women, far from it. Men had their own rules to follow, and tonight you get to watch them primp, puff, and pose like the very best of them. You edge closer to the knight with the mirror. He's adjusting his beard into the perfect rounded point, a style popular among noblemen of the time. Too scruffy and he's a savage, too bare and he looks like a boy. The goal is a beard that says, I command armies, but also attend poetry readings. Another man beside him has curls, glossy, well-defined curls that clearly didn't happen by accident. You ask his secret. He shrugs. Hot tongs and goose grease, he says. You blink. That's commitment. You thought medieval masculinity was all grit and grime. But the upper classes? Entirely different game. For noblemen, beauty was about projection, authority, elegance, virility. They wore their bodies like armour, and yes, they also had opinions about leggings. The hose, in particular, are snug. You notice several men adjusting theirs, tugging them into place with more care than you'd expect for something meant to go under a tunic. The fabric is tight across the legs and hips, emphasising the calf muscles and, well, everything else. You quickly look away. The point, apparently, was to highlight one's vigour. Athletic build was in, even if no one here has lifted anything heavier than a lute this week. Historians still argue whether these fashion choices were about vanity, status, or pure one-upmanship. Were knights curling their hair to woo ladies or to outshine their rivals at court? Was that fine linen shirt meant to impress or to signal wealth? The answer is yes. All of the above. You're led into a nobleman's dressing room. A valet is brushing his master's cloak with a boar bristle brush. Another is preparing a scented rinse for his hair. Lavender water steeped with chamomile, and a drop of vinegar to keep lice away and the shine in. The man himself stands before a mirror, tilting his head, checking his jawline like a Renaissance Instagram model. You half expect him to say, "Beard check" out loud. He catches you watching. The ladies do not faint for dull men, he says, adjusting the fall of his sleeve, so the lace peeks out just so. You must dazzle them, even in armour. And speaking of armour, it turns out not all was utilitarian. Tournament armour, especially, was often engraved, polished, even gilded, because nothing says, "Fear me," like shining like a walking chandelier. In portraits, lords are depicted with chiselled jawlines, glowing skin, and the most impossibly shiny boots. You wonder how much of that was the painters doing, and how much was the result of daily exfoliation with linen cloths and ash paste. One courtier lets you peek at his travel grooming kit. Inside, a small comb, a vial of rose oil, and, believe it or not, a pumice stone. For the feet, he adds, proudly. Because cracked heels, unacceptable. Men were also concerned with posture. A slouched back meant weakness. A broad chest puffed just so meant strength and nobility. You watch two younger men practicing their entrance poses. Turn slightly, shoulder back, pause, brooding look. It's half catwalk, half battle stance. There's even a trend among some nobles to wear corset-like undergarments, not for shaping curves, but for keeping the belly flat and the spine upright. One man jokes that he can't breathe, but at least he looks like he could win a duel. You're beginning to notice the overlap. Men and women, though held to different standards, are all doing the same dance, presenting the body as a symbol of class, of control, of identity. And yes, even men had skincare routines, sort of. One popular regimen involved rubbing the face with vinegar and breadcrumbs to remove blemishes. Another called for honey, mixed with crushed almonds, to draw out impurities. Sounds nice, until you learn that failure to follow these routines could cost you status, or worse, gossip. You pass a group of squires discussing which scent pouch is more masculine. One favours musk and clove, another swears by myrrh and pine resin. They debate it with the intensity of knights discussing sword weights. You half expect one to start a duel over sandalwood. Even the shape of the beard had meaning. A forked beard, bold, a tightly curled goatee, scholarly, clean-shaven, or either a monk or a very brave fashion risk. At certain courts, men would even bleach their facial hair to match the golden ideals of the time. Nothing says warrior like eyebrow bleach and lemon peel. You glance around and see men checking their reflections in goblets, polished shields, even puddles. You smirk. Vanity knows no bounds. Still, it's not all frills and frippery. These men are also under pressure. Just like noble women, they must maintain the illusion. A soft jawline or thinning hair could spark whispers. One knight was reportedly mocked for his patchy beard and nicknamed Sir Moth Chin. Harsh. You watch a quiet moment between two men, one combing out the other's hair with gentle strokes, the silence between them companionable, unspoken. There's tenderness here, care, a reminder that grooming in its way was also bonding. You leave the courtyard as the bell tolls noon. The men return to their routines, some to the training yard, others to a mirror. You, meanwhile, now know what goose fat smells like when it's been sitting in the sun for 2 hours. And you'll never smell rosemary quite the same way again. You duck through a narrow wooden doorway and find yourself in a tailor's workshop, the scent of lanolin and beeswax hanging thick in the air. Bolts of cloth lean against the walls, wool, linen, even a rare glimpse of silk. A cat sleeps on a heap of discarded trim, completely unbothered by the chaos around her. This is where bodies are reshaped, not through diet or exercise, but with thread, padding, and more than a little wishful thinking. Because now, it's time to talk about bodies. You've seen the faces, the hairlines, the painted skin, but medieval beauty went far deeper than skin deep, literally. You slip behind a wooden screen and find two noblewomen being laced into stiff bodices. They're not corsets in the Victorian sense, no boning, no extreme hourglass figures, but they do compress, especially the stomach. The ideal female shape in this era? Slim torso, slightly rounded belly, narrow shoulders, and a gently curved chest. No six-packs, no yoga bodies. Think soft and self-contained. Think politely padded. You reach out to touch one of the bodices hanging nearby. It's sturdy, laced tightly, and subtly lined with horsehair for structure. The servant tells you the bodice isn't just for show, it also keeps the womb secure. You blink. That's a medical opinion now? Historians still argue whether these early body-shaping garments were more about health myths or fashion ideals. Some sources claim the binding of the stomach was to keep bodily humours balanced. Others say it was just a clever way to appear rich and composed, because if your belly isn't jiggling, you probably aren't chasing pigs for a living. Meanwhile, men had their own body ideals to worry about. A tailor motions for you to stand still as he drapes a stiffened doublet across your chest. It's heavy. You feel like a mannequin. He cinches a belt tight across your middle, adjusts your shoulders back, and hands you a mirror. You look ridiculous, but also noble, because male bodies too were stylized. The medieval ideal man was broad-shouldered, narrow-hipped, with a slight pigeon chest. Yes, pigeon. This posture, achieved through tailored jackets and rigid posture, made a man appear proud, pious, and physically ready to command, even if he tripped over his sword during actual battle. Some men even stuffed the shoulders of their doublets or layered multiple tunics to create the illusion of size. And yes, padding wasn't just for armour. One nobleman swore by his stuffed arms, discreetly added beneath sleeves, to bulk up his silhouette. You try it, you feel like a fabric sausage. Elsewhere, a noblewoman tries on a dress with a high waist and flowing sleeves. The cut flatters her arms, but the servant frowns at her lower half. Too broad in the hip, she whispers, and adjusts a sash to draw the eye upward. The woman sighs. You see it happen in real time. The quiet erosion of confidence, one pin at a time. Some gowns were designed to exaggerate length. Long torso, long arms, long neck. Slender was in, but not bony. The ideal was smooth, not sharp. Ethereal, not athletic. Again, no yoga. In contrast, peasant bodies were strong, sun-darkened and muscular. Not because they wanted to be, but because they had to be. Their shapes weren't shaped by tailors, but by tools. Scythes, churns, baskets and babies. And their clothes, shaped around the body, not the other way around. You watch a young shepherdess toss a fleece over her shoulder with one arm, the muscles flexing beneath her sleeve. In another life, she'd be a warrior queen. Here she's just broad. Back at court, you overhear a group of ladies in waiting discussing waist size. They don't measure in inches, they measure in hands. Literally, how many hand widths it takes to circle your waist. One girl boasts a 3-hand waist. Another whispers she once got it down to 2.5, with fasting and a tightly pulled bodice. You resist the urge to check your own. It's not worth knowing. Food, of course, played its role. Courtly women were encouraged to eat lightly. Soups, fruits, soft breads, wine. Heavy meats and beans were for men, or peasants, or pregnant women. If you looked too hearty, people would assume you were indulging. And indulgence was unseemly, unless you were a king. Then you could be rotund and it meant you were successful. Go figure. One recipe book you skim describes a beauty broth made from almond milk, rose petals, cinnamon, and softened breadcrumbs. Not exactly a power shake, but apparently it calms the belly and sweetens the breath, and maybe, just maybe, keeps your waist within those coveted 3 hands. You pause by a mirror. A servant brings over a padded underdress. It's light but structured, enough to shape your hips and soften your outline. As she ties it, she nods approvingly. Now you look respectable, she says. You're not sure how to feel about that. There's something exhausting about it all. The way bodies are pulled, pinched, padded and paraded. As if simply being isn't enough. You must always appear. Even illness had an aesthetic. A touch of weakness. A slender frame. A too pale hue. These could signal refinement. She's delicate, someone whispers, of a woman recovering from fever. Like porcelain. Never mind that she nearly died. You catch a glimpse of a young boy in the scriptorium, hunched over his calligraphy. He's pale and thin. One monk calls him ethereal. Another says he looks touched by God. The truth? He just skips lunch to practice his lettering. And yet, despite all this pressure, the body still rebelled. It aged. It sagged. It bloated or shrank. Women gave birth and changed shape. Men got soft from too much wine. Clothes ripped, buttons popped. Real life happened, and beauty had to bend, just a little. You sit down on a bench beside an older woman. Her bodice is unlaced, her posture relaxed. She sees your expression and chuckles. "When I was young," she says, "I used to squeeze into that thing until I couldn't breathe. Now, I let the air in." You smile. Maybe that's the best shape of all, one that still inhales. You step quietly into a long gallery, the walls lined with oil portraits, each figure staring solemnly back at you through centuries of varnish and silence. This is the Royal Lookbook, the medieval version of Instagram, curated not by influencers but by painters, bishops and kings who knew that appearances were political weapons. You stand before a portrait of a queen. Her skin is luminous, almost too luminous. Her forehead vast and bare, her eyebrows missing in action, her lips the faintest hint of pink. Her hair gleams gold, tucked under a delicate net, and a single teardrop pearl rests against her collarbone. She's beautiful, but not real. This painting lies to you in the most elegant way possible, because royal beauty wasn't simply about looking good, it was about sending a message. This queen isn't just soft-skinned and symmetrical. She is divine, unreachable, almost sacred. She doesn't squint, slouch, sweat, or smirk. And if she had a birthmark, it didn't make the final edit. The court painter wasn't just an artist. He was a reputation manager, a spin doctor with a brush. He knew which features to emphasize and which to conveniently forget. A drooping eyelid? Gone. A thick nose? Slimmed. Slight moustache. Let's not even talk about it. You move to the next painting. A young prince in shining armour, his curls perfectly placed, his lips set in a solemn, noble pout. You lean in closer. The skin is eerily smooth. Is that blush? Yes. Male beauty mattered here too. The right hue on the cheek signified youth, health, and most importantly, good breeding. Historians still debate how much control royals had over their portraits. Some claim they gave exact instructions, down to the length of the earlobe or the curve of a nostril. Others think painters made judgment calls, subtly flattering without lying outright. But let's be honest, nobody was getting painted mid-pimple or post-feast. You come upon a curious painting. A queen in mourning, black veil, pale skin, eyes rimmed with delicate shadow. And yet, she's still perfect. There's no puffiness, no grief-red nose, no wrinkled brow. Her sorrow is aesthetic. Her sadness is on brand. Royal beauty didn't stop at the living either. You enter the Hall of Effigies and tomb carvings next. Here lie kings and queens carved in alabaster, their faces serene, smooth, and idealized. Even in death they were perfected, frozen at their prime. A queen who died at 47 might be sculpted to look 25. A king with a gut and gout, given a six-pack. The afterlife was, apparently, very flattering. One statue bears a trace of pigment, just enough to hint that, at some point, her lips were once painted red, and her cheeks dusted pink. Yes, they even coloured the dead. You pause at a side room filled with illuminated manuscripts. Margins are filled with doodles, some crude, some beautiful, depicting noble women with flawless features and courtly men with dainty feet. Even in these small illustrations, beauty is exaggerated. The women are always demure, the men always handsome. You wonder how many real faces ever looked like this. And yet, these images shaped expectations. A young noblewoman might study these portraits, measuring her features against those of a painted saint or idealized princess. One tiny mole, acceptable. Two, might need to adjust. Royal beauty also dictated trends. If a queen dyed her hair with saffron, suddenly saffron prices spiked. If a king trimmed his beard into a swallowtail point, half the noble court followed suit. Portraits were more than decoration. They were instruction manuals. You watch as a painter mixes pigments on a wooden palette. He's using white lead for skin, cinnabar for lips, charcoal for eyebrows. Sound familiar? Yes. The same deadly ingredients used in real-life makeup were applied here in paint form. The irony is not lost on you. He paints a noblewoman, already long dead, but he hesitates at her chin. Too strong, he mutters, and softens it. Then brightens her eyes, smooths her jaw, widens her brow. By the time he's done, she looks only vaguely like the image sketched in the corner, more goddess than human. You ask him if that's dishonest. He shrugs. The truth, he says, is not as valuable as the version people want to remember. Even royal birth announcements came with beauty language. Descriptions like flawless skin, bright eyes, and noble brow were common. If the baby had a rash or an awkward squint, well, no one needed to know. Kings didn't raise goblins. You come to a final portrait, a king in his old age, wrinkled, grey, and yet still regal. His eyes are sunken, but his hands rest confidently on the arms of his throne. The painting doesn't lie, but it doesn't apologise either. You stand there a little longer, absorbing the difference, and then, just for fun, you peek behind the canvas. There, hidden in chalk on the backboard, are the painter's notes. Reduced jowls, brighten eyes, use thinner brush on nose. So much for honesty. You leave the gallery and walk out into the corridor, your mind buzzing with faces, real, imagined, and somewhere in between. Beauty here is a curated legacy, immortal, controlled, tidy. But behind every royal lookbook is a real person, with breakouts, bad angles, and morning breath. They just didn't make it into the frame. You follow your nose now, literally. Through the hall, down a stone spiral stair, and into a warm, dim chamber where the air is so heavy with scent, it feels like you're walking through invisible clouds of cinnamon and clove. This is the perfumery, or what passes for one in a medieval castle. And tonight, you're exploring one of the most romantic, ridiculous, and often rancid corners of medieval beauty, love potions and lusty perfumes. A young noblewoman stands at a table, stirring a small brass cauldron filled with wine, crushed herbs, and a sticky, musky substance you decide not to ask about. She's humming. Dreamy-eyed, she stirs clockwise, always clockwise. So he'll be drawn to me, she murmurs. You blink. You weren't expecting actual magic, but you're also not expecting it. Because in this era, beauty wasn't always visible. Sometimes it was olfactory. If a court lady wanted to be noticed, she didn't just apply rouge, she crafted a scent, a signature, a potion, if you like, that could linger after she left a room and haunt the dreams of some unfortunate bard for weeks. One recipe calls for dried rose petals, sandalwood, and musk scraped from the glands of a civet cat. Another includes ambergris, which you might remember is regurgitated whale bile. Romantic. Then there's the ever-popular deer musk, boiled in wine and mixed with honey, stored in linen sachets and tucked discreetly into bodices. The smell? Sweet, earthy, and just shy of terrifying. You pass a tray of little wax pouches, stamped with seals. These are pomanders, meant to be worn on belts or around the neck, giving off continuous waves of scent. The ingredients vary by season and sin. For flirtation, lavender, clove, and civet. For modesty, myrrh, mint, and a pinch of ash. Historians still argue whether these blends were meant more for hygiene, seduction, or spiritual protection. After all, bad smells were believed to carry illness, so perfume was sometimes considered medicinal. But let's not pretend these weren't also love bombs. You don't mix rose, vanilla, and crushed violets, and then not try to make eye contact in the hallway. You're handed a small bottle by an older woman with a twinkle in her eye. "To stir desire," she whispers. You uncork it and immediately feel dizzy. It smells like wine-soaked flowers left too long in a warm room. Maybe passion, maybe rot. Meanwhile, a young man nearby is applying a rose-scented oil to his wrists. He adjusts his collar, fluffs his hair, and mutters something about Lady Eleonora noticing me this time. You smile. You're watching Medieval Axe body spray in action. It's not all pleasant, though. Some aphrodisiacs were more aggressive. One manuscript you flip through mentions a love charm made from boiled nettle root and dried wolf liver to be drunk by an unsuspecting suitor. Another suggests burning hair clippings with frankincense and speaking the beloved's name 9 times in moonlight. You'd laugh, but someone definitely tried it. And yes, there were edible options too: spiced wine, saffron-sweetened dates, and little almond cakes laced with cinnamon, and occasionally just a hint of opium. If it made your cheeks flush and your pupils dilate, it was fair game. The church, unsurprisingly, hated all of this. You find a stern parchment nailed to the wall, warning against potions of lust and unclean yearning. It lists forbidden herbs, damiana, mandrake, vervain, and accuses women who dabbed perfume on their necks of inviting temptation, as Eve did with the apple. One monk, apparently, declared that smelling too nice was the devil's whistle. Still, women kept dabbing, men kept sniffing, and the world spun forward. There's also the matter of love tokens, small scented items exchanged between secret lovers. A piece of embroidered cloth perfumed with rose oil, a ring wrapped in a scented ribbon. One lady even pressed marjoram and lemon balm into her letters, hoping the scent would keep her name in his mind's corner. Courtship by nose, under the radar, absolutely delightful. You watch as a servant slips a folded kerchief into a knight's glove before a tournament. He pauses, breathes it in, and grins. The crowd will see him ride for glory, but only she will know what's tucked against his palm. And sometimes the scent was memory itself. One elderly noblewoman admits she still keeps her husband's sash in her chest, 30 years after he passed. "It smells of him," she says softly, "and cloves. He always wore cloves." You move to a table covered in crushed petals and empty flasks. A recipe is scrawled across a scrap of vellum for drawing the gaze of one's intended. Lavender for lightness of spirit, cinnamon for warmth of affection, musk for heat of desire, rose for longing that lingers past parting. You bottle your own version. Just a few drops. You dab it on your wrist. It smells old, beautiful, confused, like something caught between a memory and a dream. And that's really what medieval scent was. Not just an accessory, a signal, a story told without speaking. You leave the perfumery with a slight headache and your tunic faintly damp from spilled vetiver oil. As you step back into the castle corridor, someone passes you, a courtier in velvet, and briefly his scent follows. Sharp, peppery, and undeniably flirtatious. You don't turn around, but you smile. You take a quieter hallway now, the castle's energy shifting as the sun dips lower outside, casting long shadows across stone floors. The rooms you're walking past feel different, less performative, less powdered. These are spaces not built for banquets or seduction, but for hiding, for healing, or sometimes just for enduring. Because as beautiful as the medieval world tried to be, it couldn't airbrush away its imperfections. Tonight, you're diving into what happened when beauty failed, or maybe, depending on who you ask, transformed. You pause at the threshold of a chamber where a woman sits with her face half in shadow. One side is smooth, serene. The other bears the marks of smallpox, deep pitting, a scattering of puckered scars across her cheek and forehead. She's stitching embroidery, hands moving steadily. Her veil is pulled slightly lower than usual. She doesn't meet your gaze, because in medieval Europe, flaws weren't just skin deep. They came with assumptions, some cruel, some theological, and some bizarre. A wart could be seen as a warning sign. A mole might be interpreted as a witch's mark. A scar, it depended. If you were a knight, it meant valour. If you were a woman, it might mean you were unlucky, or worse, touched. You duck into a side room and find a cabinet filled with jars. These aren't the bright powders and fragrant oils you've seen before. These are salves and poultices, ointments meant to conceal or correct, honey and lard for burns, vinegar and egg white for boils. A jar ominously labelled powder of ground toad skin. You don't ask what it's for. One nobleman with a port wine stain on his cheek reportedly covered it daily with a paste made from ash and chalk. Another had a clubfoot and wore a long cloak that trailed behind him to draw attention downward, away from the limp. These weren't just adjustments, they were survival strategies in a world where your appearance shaped your fate. But not all marks were hidden. You hear whispered stories about a noblewoman who lost her nose to leprosy and had it replaced with a silver prosthetic. She wore it proudly, even ornamented it with tiny carvings. Some said it made her look like a statue. Others said she frightened the servants. She kept it on, regardless. Silver gleaming under candlelight like a badge of endurance. Historians still argue whether facial flaws were more stigmatized among women than men. One school suggests beauty was a woman's social currency, so any disruption to that ideal was devastating. Others argue that some noble women with scars or disfigurements were still admired, sometimes for their intellect, their piety, or even the mysterious romance of their altered features. You glance at an old book on a lectern. It contains physiognomy charts, pseudo-scientific guides linking facial features to personality. A crooked nose meant a cunning mind. Deep-set eyes implied sorrow. A thin-lipped smile, deceitful. According to these, no one stood a chance. There's even a diagram labelled Signs of Divine Favour. It shows a woman with a perfectly symmetrical face, high brow, smooth skin. The caption reads, "As heaven made Eve before her fall." You resist the urge to roll your eyes, and yet the counter-narratives existed. You come across an illustrated hagiography, a biography of a saint, depicting a woman with a heavily scarred face. She was burned in a kitchen fire, refused marriage, and became a healer. In every image her scars are visible, glowing slightly with golden pigment. She's revered not in spite of her disfigurement, but because of her endurance through it. Flaws in certain rare cases became holy. One pilgrim with a cleft palate claimed it made him closer to the suffering Christ. A blind woman said her beauty faded so her soul could shine. Some scars, people believed, were divine trials, or even marks of grace. If you wore them well, if you didn't complain, you were viewed as spiritually elevated, as if pain itself could become beauty. A young servant girl approaches with a tray. Her right arm is wrapped in cloth, fingers peeking out pink and twisted. She doesn't flinch when you look. She meets your eyes, holds them. There's a strange kind of confidence in her posture, like someone who's decided long ago not to be defined by the soft gasps of strangers. In the village earlier, you remember a woman with a lazy eye joking about seeing double and charging twice the rent. Her friends laughed with her, not at her. There was something more accepting down there, less polished but more human. You ask a healer about treatments for facial scars. She shrugs. We try rose oil, honey, prayer, sometimes rabbit fat. She gestures toward the window. But mostly, we just live with it. You pause at a mirror and run your fingers along your cheek. In this world, one small spot could change everything. Your marriage prospects, your social standing, your spiritual worth. Imagine how exhausting it must have been, waking each morning and wondering if a freckle had turned into a curse. Still, there were rebellions, quiet ones. A woman, in a painted miniature, has a visible mole beside her lip, unretouched. Another wears no veil, revealing a scar across her temple from a riding accident. One lady, scandalously, tattoos a crescent moon on her shoulder with woad ink. No one mentions it aloud, but you can feel the shift. Somewhere between floor and ornament, something new is emerging. You return to the quiet room where the embroidered woman still sits. She catches your gaze this time, and she smiles. Not a big smile, but a real one. The side of her face that's scarred crinkles a bit when she does. The moment is tiny, but somehow louder than all the powdered cheeks and lead-laced perfection you've seen tonight. And for just a breath, the illusion drops. Here, in this soft corner of a hard world, imperfection becomes something else. Not shame, not sin, just truth. The halls are quieter now. Candlelight flickers against stone, the laughter from court having faded to whispers behind heavy doors. You're walking slowly, your steps softer, as if even your boots have grown tired of echoing. There's one last corridor left to explore, and it leads you down, not into a dressing room or a feasting hall, but into the still hush of memory. This is where beauty ends. And tonight, you're walking among the dead. You find yourself in a crypt chapel, the walls lined with sculpted tombs and recessed alcoves for prayer. The scent of old incense and limestone clings to the air, and the temperature drops. Not cold exactly, just still. Time seems thicker here, like breath you can't quite exhale, and carved into nearly every surface are faces. Stone faces. The ideal never dies, even here. The tomb effigies are stunning. Queens with parted lips, flawless brows, serene eyes, kings with beards curled into noble points, none of them aged, none of them flawed. Their hands are carved in prayer, their cheeks impossibly smooth, their expressions at peace. But you know by now that peace is part of the performance. These aren't honest faces, these are edited faces. Sculptors weren't tasked with memorializing the truth, they were tasked with preserving honour. A duchess who had lost half her teeth before death, given a dignified smile in alabaster. A prince who died in battle with half his face ruined, restored, symmetrical, perfected. Even decay had to be beautiful here. You run your fingers over the smooth edge of a stone cheek, cold, worn by centuries of prayer and polish. One effigy wears a delicate carved circlet. The folds of her veil etch so finely you could mistake them for fabric. But what catches your eye isn't her dress, it's her face. Slightly rounder, fuller cheeks, a hint of dimples at the corner of her lips. She looks human. And just for a moment, you wonder if the sculptor loved her too much to lie. But most aren't so gentle. One queen's tomb includes painted details, faint pigment still clinging to her lips and hair. Red lips, gold brows. She's been dead 400 years, but someone still wanted her to look presentable. Historians still debate how much input the deceased, or their families, had in these images. Were these faces idealized from memory, from a portrait, or simply pulled from the sculptor's imagination of what noble death ought to resemble? You find an alcove with something more personal, a death mask, made by pressing wax or plaster against the face shortly after death. These rare items captured features with uncanny honesty. One lies before you now, its eyes closed, lips slightly parted, skin faintly pockmarked, the nose a little crooked. It's jarring, raw, and somehow deeply comforting. Because this was her, really her. No powder, no paint, just rest. You sit on the stone bench and breathe. You're surrounded by silence, but not absence. Beauty didn't disappear here. It just changed. It softened, relaxed, let go of the pose. Even in mourning, there was performance. Tomb paintings often depicted the deceased at their most regal. Mourning garb became elaborate. Veils, embroidery, mourning jewels. Grief was stylized. A widow might wear a carved brooch bearing her husband's likeness. His features chiseled into flawless miniature. And ghost stories? Oh, they had those too. You read of a courtier who claimed to see his lost lover wandering the castle halls at dusk, her face glowing with impossible perfection, lips still rosy, her hair floating like it was underwater. "Too beautiful for the grave," he whispered. Whether she ever looked like that in life is unknown, but in death she became legend. You make your way toward the chapel exit, where the flicker of torchlight reflects off one final sculpture, a king and queen lying side by side. Their hands are clasped, their faces turned slightly toward one another, and for once the sculptor didn't aim for perfection. There are lines around their eyes, creases in the lips, a small chip in the king's nose. You smile, because that's the one you'll remember, and as you step out into the twilight, the air feels warmer, softer. The bells are ringing vespers in the distance, and the last light of day spills over the castle rooftops, golden and forgiving. The stone walls fall away behind you, and the path smooths beneath your feet. No more mirrors, no more powders, no more needles hovering near your brows. Just the hush of night, and the comfort of having seen what lies beneath the velvet and silk. You've walked through centuries of beauty and broken rules. You've watched women paint their faces into porcelain masks, and men oil their hair like warriors preparing for battle. You've seen faces erased, altered, glorified, and you've seen the quiet bravery in letting the mask slip. Your footsteps slow. The world narrows to the soft sound of wind through the trees, the rustle of your cloak, and the faraway hush of evening bells. You breathe in deeply. No rose oil, no civet musk, just air, just now. Behind every high forehead and powdered cheek was a person, someone who whispered at night, who scratched at a rash under a veil, who wondered if they were enough. The standards may have been strange, even cruel, but the desire to be loved, noticed, remembered, that's timeless. And now, as your body grows heavier beneath the soft blankets around you, you let those powdered ghosts drift farther behind. The castle fades, the chatter stills, and even the vanity quiets. There is nothing you must change, nothing you must fix. You are, in this moment, exactly enough. The hum of sleep is close now, close as a hand smoothing your brow, close as a quiet room lit only by candlelight. Let your breath slow, let your jaw soften, let yourself drift. And as the stars gather overhead, know that every version of you, flawed, radiant, bare, is quietly, gently beautiful. Sweet dreams.